When you cut him out quietly, you don't need to shout, argue, or prove anything. Your silence becomes a mirror he can't ignore, and your absence becomes the reality check he never saw coming. Karma doesn't need your help. It simply delivers the truth while you rise in peace, strength, and self-worth. Silence is the ultimate statement because it communicates more than words ever could. When you choose to leave quietly, you're stepping out of the cycle of drama and emotional exchange that someone relied on to feel in control. Often, when we're hurt or taken for granted, the first instinct is to argue, explain, or make someone see the error of their ways. We think that by speaking, we're asserting our power or reclaiming our worth, but in reality, those words often feed the very dynamic we're trying to escape. Every explanation, every argument, every plea gives them more material to twist, ignore, or dismiss. Silence, on the other hand, shuts all of that down. It's a boundary that doesn't ask for negotiation, apology, or understanding. It simply exists, and its power lies in its finality. When you remove yourself without fanfare, you're signaling that your energy, your time, and your emotions are no longer available for manipulation. People who thrive on control, inconsistency, or ego-driven behavior are accustomed to having access to your reactions. They rely on your attention, your explanations, and your willingness to engage to validate themselves. Silence takes that away. It deprives them of their usual leverage and forces them into a position they're uncomfortable with, one where the consequences of their actions can no longer be softened or ignored. The quiet is deafening for someone who has always relied on your responses to measure their importance. What makes silence so profound is that it speaks with clarity without aggression. It doesn't need to call out wrongdoing or demand recognition. Your absence itself becomes the statement. It says, I will no longer participate in this dynamic. I will no longer validate behavior that disrespects me. I will no longer compromise my peace for someone who cannot value it. And because it's quiet, it doesn't provoke defensiveness, excuses, or manipulation. It doesn't provide a chance for the person to argue or convince themselves that they're still in control. Silence leaves only reflection, and that is where the impact lies. Moreover, silence is a statement that empowers you. When you stop reacting, you regain control over your emotional world. You're no longer subject to the roller coaster of waiting for someone else to meet your needs or acknowledge your worth. You start to see that your value isn't determined by their recognition or response. By leaving quietly, you reclaim your narrative and take it entirely into your own hands. Your life, your choices, your peace are no longer negotiable. That autonomy radiates confidence and self-respect in ways that words alone cannot convey. It's also important to understand that silence creates space, both for you and for them. For you, it provides the clarity and calm to step back, reflect, and heal without interference. For them, it removes the cushion that allowed avoidance, manipulation, or neglect to continue unchecked. In that void, they are left with the reality of their choices. They may not like it, they may resist it, but they cannot escape it. Silence forces them to confront what they previously overlooked or ignored, and in that confrontation lies the subtle power of karma. Ultimately, silence isn't about winning or punishing. It's about setting a boundary that can't be argued with, ignored, or minimized. It's about demonstrating that your peace and self-worth are non-negotiable. It's the clearest, most dignified way to communicate that the relationship is over and that the responsibility for understanding the loss now lies entirely with them. In cutting someone out quietly, you create a force more impactful than any argument, a presence defined by absence, a statement defined by calm, and a power defined by self-respect. Your exit exposes his true character in a way nothing else can. When you're still present, still reacting, still giving energy, it's easy for him to hide behind excuses, charm, or distraction. He can continue to act inconsistently or negligently because your involvement cushions the impact of his behavior. He can manipulate the narrative, convince himself he's doing enough, or avoid responsibility altogether. But the moment you quietly remove yourself from his life, all of that disappears. There is no buffer, no softening of the truth, and no opportunity to manipulate your emotions to justify his choices. Your absence shines a light on the reality he preferred to avoid, and suddenly the person he really is becomes unavoidable. When you step away without drama, you give him no tools to negotiate his way back into your life. He cannot charm you with apologies that are empty or promises that have no follow-through. He cannot rely on your emotional labor to smooth over the cracks in the connection. Your quiet exit becomes the mirror he must face, reflecting all the ways he failed to show up, failed to prioritize you, and failed to respect your worth. And because it is quiet, it carries a weight that words or arguments never could. It is a statement that cannot be diminished, debated, or ignored. Exposing his true character is not about shaming or humiliating him. It is about clarity. When you leave calmly and without confrontation, he is forced to confront himself. He has no one else to blame, no distraction, and no cushion to soften the consequences of his behavior. He begins to see patterns he once justified or overlooked, the times he dismissed your feelings, the moments he didn't make an effort, the promises he never kept, and the small ways he took you for granted. Your absence turns these behaviors into a series of undeniable truths that he can no longer hide behind charm, excuses, or manipulation. The process of realizing his true character is often uncomfortable for him because he is suddenly left with the weight of his own choices. Without your reactions to soothe his guilt or your presence to maintain the illusion, he begins to feel the repercussions of his behavior in a way he never did before. It may start subtly, a sense of missing your attention, a quiet reflection on what went wrong, but over time the realization grows. He sees the contrast between who you are when you are calm, empowered, and independent, and who he was when he had access to your time, energy, and love without reciprocating. Your quiet exit also allows you to reclaim your own perspective and clarity. Being the one to step back without confrontation gives you distance from his patterns, enabling you to see them without distortion or emotional entanglement. You can observe the truth of his behavior objectively, without being pulled back into cycles of frustration or hope. In doing so, you reinforce your own boundaries and reinforce the message that your value is non-negotiable. Furthermore, this exposure has a ripple effect that goes beyond immediate reflection. Others who witness your calm exit may also see the contrast between the two of you, which reinforces the reality of his choices in a social and emotional sense. Your actions silently communicate that respect, consistency, and self-worth are standards you will no longer compromise, and that failing to meet those standards has consequences. Ultimately, leaving quietly to expose his true character is an act of empowerment. It allows you to take control of your narrative, prioritize your peace, and demonstrate that your worth is independent of his recognition. By withdrawing calmly, you reveal the full picture of who he is, not through confrontation, but through absence. This quiet revelation becomes unavoidable for him, and the truth he must face, his inconsistency, neglect, or lack of respect, now stands starkly, undeniable, and fully accountable. Karma works in subtle, undeniable ways, and when you cut someone out quietly, you set it in motion without even trying. Many people believe that justice or consequences need to be orchestrated, that revenge requires effort or confrontation. But real karmic balance doesn't need your interference. it operates naturally. When you step back calmly, without anger or drama, you remove yourself from the dynamic that allowed mistreatment to persist, and the universe has a way of filling that absence with clarity and consequence. Your quiet exit becomes a channel for karma to deliver the reality check he never saw coming, not because you engineered it, but because you created the space for it to unfold. Karma is most effective when it's subtle. It doesn't always arrive as immediate punishment or confrontation. Sometimes it shows up as a growing awareness, a series of small realizations, or a creeping discomfort that forces reflection. When you stop explaining yourself, stop chasing validation, and stop reacting to his behavior, he loses the familiar patterns that allowed him to avoid responsibility. Your silence, your absence, and your calm serve as triggers for him to confront the truth he previously ignored. And because there is no drama attached, the lesson hits harder. It is precise, unavoidable, and undeniable. By removing yourself quietly, you are essentially withdrawing the emotional scaffolding that supported his behavior. He can no longer rely on your reactions to justify or soften his choices. The comfort of your presence, which allowed him to avoid the consequences of his actions, is gone. In that emptiness, he begins to experience the natural repercussions of neglect, inconsistency, or disregard. Karma, in this sense, is not punishment. It is simply the mirror of reality reflecting back what he created. Your quiet decision to step away ensures that the mirror is unbroken, unfiltered, and unavoidable. The beauty of karma in this context is that it delivers without you needing to be involved. There is no need for confrontation, for messages, or for vindictive gestures. Your act of leaving quietly is enough to set the process in motion. While you focus on your growth, your peace, and your new life, the universe orchestrates the consequences naturally. Every missed opportunity, every moment of reflection, every subtle feeling of regret he experiences is the direct result of the space you created by stepping back. You don't need to orchestrate events to prove a point. Your life becomes the proof. Karma also works by contrast. Your quiet eggs, it highlights the difference between what was and what could have been. As you elevate, as you reclaim your time, your energy, and your emotional well-being, he is left to measure what he lost. It becomes impossible to ignore the gap between the life you are building and the life he allowed himself to keep. Subtle cues, your confidence, your happiness, your calm serve as reflections of the choices he made. The universe delivers this reality check delicately but effectively, showing him the impact of his actions without your involvement. Importantly, letting karma work allows you to maintain dignity and emotional composure. You don't stoop to arguments or manipulation because you understand that the most powerful lessons are experienced, not forced. By stepping away quietly, you preserve your peace and ensure that the consequences fall where they belong, naturally and authentically. Karma becomes the vehicle, and your calm departure is the catalyst. Ultimately, cutting him out quietly and letting karma deliver the reality check is about trusting the process. It's about knowing that you don't need to fight, explain, or prove anything. The universe has a way of balancing the scales when you choose yourself first. By walking away with calm and integrity, you set in motion a force that is subtle, undeniable, and transformative. One that delivers truth in the quietest, most powerful way possible. Quiet removal is a power move because it communicates strength without a single word. When you walk away calmly and without drama, you show that your worth, your peace, and your emotional energy are non-negotiable. Too often, people believe that making a statement requires shouting, confrontation, or a visible show of anger. But the most powerful statements are those that are made silently, through action rather than reaction. By stepping away without noise, you take control of the narrative and leave no room for debate or misinterpretation. Your exit itself becomes the demonstration of power, and that kind of authority is impossible to ignore. When someone has been used to your constant presence, your patience, or your explanations, your quiet removal disrupts their world. They've relied on your emotional availability as a safety net, a buffer that allowed them to avoid consequences. Suddenly, that safety net disappears. You no longer provide the reactions, the attention, or the validation that maintained their comfort. By removing yourself quietly, you create a gap that forces them to confront their behavior without the distractions they once depended on. They cannot manipulate, negotiate, or plead because you are no longer available to respond. This absence of engagement is where your power lies. It is the ultimate boundary, communicated through action rather than argument. The act of leaving quietly also elevates your own sense of self-respect and autonomy. Power comes not from controlling someone else, but from taking full responsibility for your own life and emotions. When you disengage from a relationship or situation that no longer serves you, you reclaim the control that may have been lost while trying to make someone else recognize your worth. You demonstrate that your standards are immovable, that your peace is sacred, and that you do not negotiate your value for the sake of someone else's comfort. That clarity is magnetic and undeniable. It communicates strength in a way that words could never achieve. Another aspect of quiet removal as a power move is that it forces reflection without confrontation. Drama, arguments, and accusations often result in defensiveness and deflection. They give the other person a chance to justify their behavior or avoid facing the consequences. Silence, on the other hand, removes all of those avenues. By exiting quietly, you create a space where they are left to wrestle with their own actions. The realization of what they lost, what they failed to give, and how they contributed to the breakdown of the relationship becomes unavoidable. They must confront reality, and this confrontation happens on their own terms, without you adding fuel to the fire. This type of power is subtle but far-reaching. It's not about forcing guilt or eliciting regret. It's about demonstrating that you are no longer participating in behaviors that diminish you. Your calm departure signals a higher standard for your life and your relationships. You are showing that your time, energy, and emotions are precious and cannot be squandered. That demonstration resonates not only with the person you leave behind, but also with yourself. It strengthens your confidence, your clarity, and your understanding of what you will and will not tolerate. In essence, quiet removal is a declaration of self-worth and sovereignty. It communicates that you are no longer available to play roles that compromise your peace, and it forces the other person to face the reality of their choices. It's a power move that is dignified, unshakable, and deeply transformative. By leaving without drama, you protect your energy, uphold your standards, and allow the natural consequences of their behavior to unfold. This quiet assertion of boundaries and self-respect is one of the most potent forms of power a person can exercise because it doesn't demand attention. It commands it through presence, absence, and unwavering integrity. Absence forces reflection because it removes the distractions and buffers that allowed someone to ignore the impact of their behavior. When you are constantly present, responding, or explaining, the other person rarely has to stop and examine themselves. They can justify their choices, minimize their mistakes, or shift the blame because your energy is always available to absorb the consequences of their actions. But when you step back quietly and remove yourself from their life, you create a vacuum that compels them to confront reality. Without your reactions, attention, or presence, they are left alone with the consequences of their actions, and reflection becomes unavoidable. When someone has taken you for granted, your absence illuminates the value they failed to recognize. It is one thing to hear complaints, arguments, or explanations. It is another to experience the void left by the person they disregarded. Every day they no longer see you, hear from you, or rely on your presence. They are reminded of the consistency, care, and emotional investment they dismissed. The small moments they ignored, the times they failed to show up, to listen, or to prioritize you become starkly visible in the emptiness you leave behind. Absence removes excuses and softens no edges. It exposes the truth in the clearest way possible. Reflection is intensified because absence highlights the contrast between life with you and life without you. When you were present, he may have believed that your efforts, patience, and understanding were guarantees, constants that required no effort on his part. But your departure disrupts that perception. Suddenly, he experiences the emotional gap, the practical inconveniences, and the subtle ways your presence enhanced his life. Without you, he begins to see what he overlooked, and the recognition that he failed to appreciate you fully becomes unavoidable. Absence does not shout, it allows him to hear the quiet echoes of what he lost. The process of reflection triggered by absence is often uncomfortable because it is slow, cumulative, and undeniable. It may begin with subtle feelings of loss or frustration, and gradually deepen into recognition and self-examination. He may notice the small routines or support systems he took for granted, the moments of emotional stability you provided, or the consistency of your care. The very calmness and peace you maintain in your absence amplify the reflection because it highlights the contrast between his actions and your boundaries. He sees what he could not appreciate before, and the realization grows steadily, sometimes painfully, over time. Absence also provides you with clarity and perspective. By stepping away, you remove yourself from the cycle of reactivity, confusion, and emotional labor. This distance allows you to see patterns and truths that may have been obscured by involvement. You begin to understand the dynamics clearly, recognize your own value, and reinforce your standards for the future. In doing so, you create a mirror for him to confront himself, one that is free of manipulation, distraction, or negotiation. Furthermore, absence works as a natural catalyst for accountability. You do not need to instruct, argue, or demand recognition. The space you leave forces him to grapple with his choices. He may feel regret, frustration, or even a desire to change, but those feelings are genuine because they are born from the reality of his actions rather than external pressure. This type of reflection is far more effective and lasting than confrontation because it is internalized. Ultimately, absence forces reflection because it removes everything that allowed avoidance, denial, or complacency to persist. It exposes patterns, highlights value, and compels self-examination. By stepping away quietly and maintaining your peace, you create an environment in which he must confront his behavior on his own, while you gain clarity, freedom, and empowerment. Your absence becomes a powerful mirror, reflecting the truth he ignored and allowing both of you to experience the consequences of the choices made in the most natural and undeniable way. Your growth becomes his wake-up call because when you cut him out and begin to focus on yourself, the transformation is undeniable. Growth isn't about seeking revenge or making someone feel small. It's about reclaiming your life, your energy, and your emotional power. The moment you start investing in your own happiness, well-being, and self-development, it creates a contrast he can't ignore. He begins to see the person he once underestimated, dismissed, or took for granted thriving without him. That realization acts as a mirror, reflecting back the consequences of his actions and decisions in a way that words or confrontation never could. Growth is most impactful when it's visible. Every step you take toward a more empowered, confident version of yourself highlights the gaps between your life and the life he allowed himself to experience with you. He may notice the calm in your demeanor, the confidence in your posture, or the peace that radiates from your everyday actions. These subtle cues are reminders that the person he once knew no longer exists in the same context. She has evolved beyond the patterns that kept her tied to him. Your success, happiness, and emotional stability are not trophies for him to admire. They are the natural byproducts of your decision to step away and prioritize yourself. This wake-up call works because it is unintentional. You are not performing for him, nor are you actively trying to elicit regret. Growth is authentic, and authenticity is magnetic. The changes he observes are real, and they expose the consequences of his neglect, inconsistency, or inability to value you. While he may attempt to rationalize or justify his past behavior, the evidence is clear in the life you are now leading. Every moment of self-care, every accomplishment, every sign of peace and contentment silently communicates that the choice to leave him behind was necessary and transformative. Growth also communicates boundaries in the most powerful way. By evolving emotionally, mentally, and socially, you are establishing standards he cannot meet unless he changes fundamentally. This isn't about controlling him, it's about showing through your actions that your life and well-being are non-negotiable. The more he sees your life flourishing, the more he is confronted with the reality of what he failed to protect or appreciate. Your personal evolution becomes the vehicle through which karma delivers its lesson without interference from you. Moreover, your growth underscores the principle that self-worth is internal, not dependent on someone else's recognition. The lessons he experiences are amplified because he witnesses the consequences of taking someone's presence for granted while that person continues to elevate themselves. He realizes, often too late, that he allowed a unique and valuable connection to slip away while you were busy building a life independent of his validation. Your growth becomes a living testament to the power of self-respect and autonomy. The wake-up call is subtle yet persistent. It manifests in small ways: the confidence you carry into a room, the ease with which you navigate social or professional spaces, the calm with which you handle situations he once thought he could provoke or manipulate. He may feel regret, confusion, or even longing, but those emotions are natural consequences of observing your evolution. The impact is more profound than confrontation because it is continuous and unavoidable. He sees it daily without needing to be reminded of what he lost. Ultimately, your growth becomes his wake-up call because it demonstrates the truth he could not see when you were present and available. It reveals the full extent of what he neglected, disrespected, or took for granted. And while he is left to process that reality, you are already living it, peaceful, empowered, and fully aware of your own worth. Your evolution is both your liberation and the silent, undeniable message that some opportunities once lost cannot be reclaimed. In the end, cutting him out quietly isn't about proving a point or seeking revenge. It's about reclaiming your life, your peace, and your worth. Your silence, your absence, and your growth speak louder than any words ever could. Karma delivers the reality check naturally, and while he faces the consequences of his actions, you rise into clarity, confidence, and freedom, fully in control of the life you deserve.